We are almost home. What comes to mind when you hear that? We're almost home. Maybe depending on the tone of it might determine how you hear it. Hear it like this. We're almost home. Who might say that? Perhaps a parent in a long car ride with kids who keep asking the same question again and again. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? I got to go to the bathroom. Hold it. We're almost home. And yet others of us may rightly hear that, perhaps in this tone, we're almost home, referring to heaven. And it's interesting, as I reflected upon those two possible ways of hearing it, depending on what the tone is, there's a connection between them. Just like a child in the car feeling the pain of a full bladder and longing to be at a place where there's relief, so too, we Christians feel the pain of our sojournings in this life where we just want to get home. We just want to get home. We are almost home. Even if you live another 80 years in this life, if you're a Christian, you can still say, I'm almost home, especially when you know that home is forever. And it is. This story in Genesis chapter 21, the end of Genesis 21, is about that. It's a little bit difficult to see at first. Like who's this Abimelech guy? I think we've seen him before. What's his concern with Abraham? What's Abraham so upset about this well? Why does that bother him? Is this perhaps it's just a story about how to learn some principles on resolving conflict? I think you can take some application away from that. But then you notice how it ends. Abraham plants a tree. So maybe this is a story about how to be good stewards of the earth. Go plant a tree. Like, what does this have to do with us? Though a seemingly insignificant event in the history of the world, and even in the story of Genesis, this account here is meant to fuel trust in this. God will keep his promise to bring us home. Because in the first part of Genesis chapter 21, if you remember last week, there was a threat to one of God's promises to Abraham, namely the promise of offspring, that he would have a son who would then be made into a great nation. There was a threat to that when Ishmael, Abraham's older son, mocks him, and so Ishmael was removed. Now we see another threat, a threat to a different part of God's promise to Abraham, and it's a threat to the promise of a land. Remember when God promised him that? I will make your offspring great into a great nation, then I will bring them into a land of rest where they will experience that promise forever. This well here, in this account, was built by Abraham on the land that Abraham's offspring would one day inherit. And therefore, this whole scene is meant to be a small picture, a tiny taste of the fact that God will indeed fully fulfill his promise one day. That's what's going on here. Let me remind us of why the promise of the land is so important. Like, who cares? A piece of real estate in the Middle East called Canaan, it's now called Israel. Like, why is this land promise so important? If you remember, just as you think about the scriptures, what does land, this promise of land, this promise of a place, signify in the scriptures? It's a promise of God's presence with his people in that place. A special presence, not like a presence like God. God is just always everywhere at the same time. That's true. But you see throughout Scripture these promises of God's special presence with his people in the place that he has promised for them to go. And so if you just trace this theme of the land throughout the Bible, you'll see that theme emerge. The promise of God's presence. Where did it begin? What was the first land, the first place that God gave to his people? The Garden of Eden, with Adam and Eve. A land, a place of perfect paradise in the presence of God. But we know what happened. Adam and Eve sinned, and their punishment was to be expelled from the land, which meant they no longer experienced the personal presence of God in that place. And so from Genesis 3 on, there's like this anticipation that God will provide a place again for his people to dwell, where he will be with them and be their God. That's why this promise of land is so important, because it was lost because of sin. He says to Abraham, I'm going to bring it back. But I've said many times in our study throughout the book of Genesis that the land promised to Abraham is way too big to fit within the bounds of a piece of real estate in the Middle East. Even Abraham's offspring, the nation of Israel, who would occupy that land many generations later, they were still in the occupation of that land, only catching a glimpse of what would be to come. There's a reason, as we read in Romans chapter 4, that Paul says the promise to Abraham's offspring is that they would be heirs. He doesn't say of a piece of land in Palestine. He says heirs of the world. That was the anticipation even in the Garden of Eden, which had boundaries, and they were supposed to be fruitful and multiply so that the image of God spread across the whole earth, so that the whole world became the special place of God's presence. Do you follow? Do you? Kinda? Give me a head nod if you follow. Okay, I need some engagement here. Wake you guys up. And so that was the anticipation, lost when they sinned. Now we have this other land, but that land isn't it either. There is this anticipation that the whole creation is going to be filled with God's special, personal, covenant presence. And that's why you and I, who are Christians, are said to be heirs of the whole world. Do you realize that's what heaven is? Heaven, the final state of eternity, is not this place where you're disembodied from you just have a disembodied soul floating in a cloud. That don't sound good. Heaven, or what you might call the new creation, is that final place when God transforms this world, making it perfect, without sin, without suffering, because he's going to be there in the person of Christ, and we will be with him forever. I'm getting way ahead of myself. I'm getting excited here. And in Romans 4, the promise is not just for physical offspring of Abraham, it's for anyone who put their trust in Jesus, which Galatians says is the true offspring of Abraham. So, this passage here is meant to give Abraham, but even more the people of Israel who read the book of Genesis, these people who are about to inherit that land, they're on the brink of inheriting the land promise. It's meant to give them confidence, and it's meant to give you who trust in Christ confidence that God will bring his people home. How does this passage do that? There are two truths about God in this passage that hold the two scenes together. And these two truths are meant to fuel your trust in this promise that God will bring you home. Let's take each truth. First, God is present. God is with you. And I don't just mean he's kind of there hanging out. His presence is a favoring presence. He loves you. He favors you. He does good to you. Look at verse 22. Genesis 21, verse 22. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, God is with you in all that you do. I think Abimelech spoke better than he knew. Why does he say this? God is with you in all you do. He sees the favoring hand of God present with Abraham. What does he see? Remember, we first encountered Abimelech back in chapter 20, when Abraham sojourned in his land, and he repeated the thing he did back in chapter 12 in Egypt, where he comes into Abimelech, king of Gerar, comes into his land, and he gets scared that they're going to kill him and take his wife. So he says to them, my wife is not my wife, she's actually my sister. He just said, she's my sister. And so they take her. Abimelech intends to take her as his wife, and God intervenes, doesn't he? He spreads disease so that ain't nothing going to happen, and then tells Abimelech in a dream, you're a dead man. You better give Abraham his wife back. And he's like, I didn't know. It's interesting. He pleads ignorance there, just like he pleads ignorance here. But I didn't know. I didn't know. And so he gave her back. And then he also gave Abraham like the gifts of a bunch of cattle. And then he said to Abraham back in chapter 20, feel free to dwell in any part of my land. You pick it, it's yours. Now fast forward about 3 years to this account where Abimelech, along with his army commander, why does he feel the need to bring him? Setting up this meeting with Abraham. It's an important meeting if he brings his army commander along with him. For protection, for what? What is he seeing in Abraham that he sets up this meeting with him? He says to Abraham, God is with you in all that you do. So this pagan king recognizes the favoring presence of God on Abraham's life, because word seems to be spreading about this guy Abraham. He's gaining prominence to such a degree that this king who once blessed Abraham feels now to set up this meeting to have a little chat. What does he want? Look at verse 23. Verse 23. Now therefore, so I see God's hand upon you. Verse 23. Now therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me or with my descendants or with my posterity, but as I have dealt kindly with you, so you deal with me with the land where you have sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear. So he's seeing something. He sees Abraham's rising prominence, and he sees that this God who has power, he experienced the very power of the God of Abraham, is showing favor to him. So he's trying to get ahead of the game a little bit. See what he's doing? Getting Abraham to commit to dealing kindly with him, not only now, but also his future offspring. I want you to commit, Abraham, to have your offspring treat my offspring kindly. I was kind to you. Let's make a pact in perpetuity to be kind to me and my people, because I can tell God is with you in all that you do. This is what the people of Israel, reading this passage as they're on the brink of inheriting the promised land, needed to hear. God is with you. If he was with our forefather Abraham and we are his offspring, surely he's with us. This is what Christians need to know as we sojourn in a land not our own, awaiting our final home. God is with you in all that you do. I just want you to think about what difference that might make even this week if you really believe, as you reflect upon that truth, God is with you. Think of the comfort you'd have. Think of the boldness you might experience. Think of the security you would know, the gratefulness you would feel. Think of the sins you would avoid. Think of the words you would choose to speak or not speak. Think of the thoughts that you would just want to put to death because you know God knows them all. He's with you. Think of the people that you might serve. God is with you in all that you do. I don't think Abimelech realized when he said it, but he is actually reiterating a very promise that God has given to Abraham for his offspring, giving them confidence that God will bring them home. And this is a promise that would be fully realized in a new and better covenant that even non-Israelites, Gentiles like you and me, would get to participate in. I want you to listen to the wording of the covenant, the promise that God makes for those in Jesus, those in Christ, and how it serves as the fulfillment of the promise to Abraham, specifically as it relates to the land. Listen to this from Jeremiah 32. Okay, you can turn there if you like. You don't have to. I don't even have the verses written down, so I can't tell you what verses they are. It's toward the end. Jeremiah 32, listen to this. Behold, I will gather my people from all the countries to which I drove them in my anger and my wrath and in great indignation. I will bring them back to this place, referring to the land that God promised to Abraham, the land of Canaan. And I will make them dwell in safety, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God. I will give them one heart and one way, that they may fear me forever. For their own good and the good of their children after them, I will make with them an everlasting covenant, that I will not turn away from doing good to them. And I will put the fear of me in their hearts, that they may not turn from me. I will rejoice in doing them good. I will plant them in this land in faithfulness with all my heart and with all my soul. Amen? You just think of God's heart here. Like he is rejoicing over his people, whom he is going to put in the land, because he's going to be there with them and they with him forever. And he's really happy about that. And that's a promise. When is it fulfilled? When will it come fully and finally? You can be sure God will bring it, because he is with you to bring you there. That's truth number one. Truth number two, God is eternal. God is eternal. Now that truth is kind of tucked away in verse 33. And it may just seem like a throwaway comment, but I actually think the whole second half of this conversation between Abraham and Abimelech is meant to lead us towards this conclusion about God. He is eternal. So notice how the conversation takes a turn in verse 25. Look at verse 25. When Abraham reproved Abimelech about a well of water that was Abimelech's, that Abimelech's servants had seized. Now let me stop. So they're talking, just made this verbal oath to be kind to each other in perpetuity with their offspring, and Abraham decides to bring up an issue. All right, you want to be kind to each other, I'll deal kindly with you and you with me, but what about that well, my well, that your servants seized? What about that? Apparently, some of Abimelech's herdsmen somehow gained control of a well that Abraham had built. Perhaps they just kind of had all their flocks nearby and just limited access to everyone else, or removed access to everyone else, even Abraham's servants. And Abraham brings it up. They're hogging the well, and it's my well. Why does he do this? Why does it matter? Why? Is he just being kind of stingy? You know, Abraham, share some water, bro. What's going on? Well, wells were not easy to construct in that day. You'd have to dig through soil and rock and stone, sometimes down 200 feet. I was told like 100 to 200, depending on where that water table is to get water. You remember, they're in the desert, the Middle East. And they didn't have big old excavators, big machines. What did they use? Hand tools, chipping away. I mean, you can imagine how long it took to build a well. And just hauling the dirt up in buckets, maybe with a levee system. The well was about 7 to 10 feet in diameter. And along the way, as they dug, it had to be lined up with these stones so that it just didn't collapse in. It was a lot of work. I mean, just digging through that soil. You ever dug through Texas soil? It ain't soil. It's like rock. We have a basketball hoop in our driveway, and the directions said you got to go at least 3 feet deep. I'm like, 3 feet? That feels like forever in Texas soil. I was digging away, and it was not so. I was hitting what felt like slabs of concrete. And I just gave up at 2.5 feet. And hopefully our basketball hoop just doesn't fall over. But that's not the only reason why Abraham was so committed to getting his well back. Just it was hard to dig. It was his. It was his. And Abimelech's servant seized control of it. Like, do you want this peace treaty with me? What about my well? What's going on? What's up with this well? Hold on to that. And notice how Abimelech responds to Abraham's confrontation about the well. Look at verse 26. Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, and I have not heard of it until today. Now, I'm adding some tone there because I think that's the correct interpretation of his response. He's clearly defensive, isn't he? How often do you respond like Abimelech when confronted? I was thinking about this. This is such a typical human response, right? We appeal to our ignorance and then blame it on the other person. You know what I'm talking about? Like instead of just saying, man, thanks for bringing this to my attention, I'm sorry, let me see if I can make this right. What do we say? Well, I didn't even know about this. Why do you think he's telling you? He's telling you right now. Well, why did you just now tell me? And we start blame shifting, getting the focus off of the critique itself that we are responsible for, and we put the focus on the way the person is critiquing. You know what I'm talking about? We do it all the time. It's a form of deflection because it's uncomfortable to be exposed, isn't it? Sure, Abimelech didn't know about it until now, but that's why Abraham's telling him, and yet he's blaming Abraham for not telling him until now. But he's telling him. We need to beware of this in our own hearts, don't we? I didn't know. Now you do, so deal with it. But why are you just now telling me about this? Does it matter? Just the kind of person who, when confronted, your default disposition is not to blame the confronter by critiquing the way they critique. You shouldn't have critiqued me this way, which gets the focus off the critique and onto the method of critique. This is such a common thing. We see it in the church, and it's very unhealthy. Kenny, can I just speak to you? Let us strive to be the kind of people that can receive confrontation well, and we're not automatically on the defense. Right? Like assume the best in that person's heart, that they actually love you enough to bring something up. Now, if you think that I'm just passionate about this, preaching this because I'm bothered by you all who don't receive critique well, you're missing the whole point. I'm preaching to me. Like I'm just constantly feeling in my own heart. I've had some people say, I appreciate the way you receive critique. You don't know what's going on in here. Like it's just so hard to feel exposed that you're just not perfect. Why do we do this? Isn't it pride? We have this insatiable desire to feel justified before others, don't we? And this is why we need to keep preaching the gospel of justification to ourselves. And therefore, we sure everyone else around us sees us as above critique when we're not. The gospel should produce in us a kind of humility that receives critique without immediate blame shift, because we know our acceptance before God is not on the basis of our perfect record of life in no need of critique. Our acceptance before God is on the basis of Jesus' perfect record of life that didn't need any critique. That's what the gospel is. That's what the good news of Christianity is. Jesus died for sinners, taking the punishment they deserved. And he rose again, conquering sin and death, such that anyone who would simply trust in him receives his perfect life credited to their account. There's a security there that you can have that gives you a humility to receive confrontation when needed. So don't be like this insecure king who can't handle a little critique. He throws a tantrum. However, it does seem, after he throws his little tantrum, Abimelech agrees to make this well conflict right. So he and Abraham formalize that verbal treaty in the first part of the passage with now a covenant that they make with each other. Look at verse 27. Verse 27, so Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two men made a covenant. Made a covenant literally means cut a covenant. Do you remember this? We saw it back in Genesis 15 when Abraham cut animals in half, but we know he didn't walk through them, only God walked through, showing God saying, Abraham, I'm going to keep my promise to you, and if I don't, let me be as these animals. Here in this passage, it's implied that the animals were cut because they cut a covenant, and both Abraham and Abimelech walked through saying, I will uphold my end of this promise, and if I don't, let me be as these animals. That's what these animals are for that Abraham provides. But then he provides some other animals. Look at verse 28. Verse 28. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock apart. So these lambs were not a part of the ones that were cut. He set them apart. Why? Verse 29. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs that you have set apart? And he said, these 7 ewe lambs you will take from my hand, that this may be a witness for me that I dug this well. So they're a gift from Abraham to Abimelech, which is surprising because back in chapter 20, Abimelech was the one who gifted Abraham with some cattle. Roles are kind of reversing here. Abraham is increasing in wealth and showing his generosity. There's more going on than that. He says that these 7 ewe lambs serve as a sign that the 7 ewe lambs, it's like oddly emphasized that there were 7 of them. The number 7 is emphasized in this passage. You might not pick up on some of it, but you have the 7 ewe lambs weirdly emphasized that there's 7 of them. Why? And then Abimelech's name is mentioned 7 times. Abraham's name is mentioned 7 times. If you read the ESV, it's mentioned 8 times, but in verse 33 in the Hebrew, it just says he, not his actual name. I think the author, namely Moses, is intentionally highlighting the number 7. Why? Do you know what the place is where they made this covenant? Look at verse 31. Verse 31. Therefore that place was called Beersheba, because both of them swore an oath. So they made a covenant at Beersheba. Now some of you may have a footnote next to the word Beersheba. My footnote, this is those who helped translate this Bible, put this footnote in here to help you understand what the Hebrew means. It says, my footnote says, Beersheba means well of 7 or well of the oath. Could be translated either, and I think it's intentionally ambiguous because that word Sheba sounds like 7 and the word oath or swear, which is the word that both Abraham and Abimelech used. If you swear, and Abraham says, I will swear. So this is the idea of oath is all throughout this passage, and it's oddly connected to the number 7. What's going on? Can you think of another passage in Genesis where the number 7 is really important? Genesis chapter 1, God created the earth in 6 days and completed it, finished it on day what? That's why the number 7 has become such an important number throughout Scripture. It's the number 7 because it's associated with the 6 days and finishing creation on the 7th day. It's been associated with this idea of completion. It's done. So connecting the number 7 with the word oath or swear in this passage, this is Abraham really emphasizing how important it is that he keeps this covenant. Keep your oath. It's done. It's complete. Don't go back on it. It's finished. What oath? Give me back my well. What? Like, you're making such a big deal out of this well? Why is it such a big deal? He reproved Abimelech for it. They make a blood covenant over it. He gives 7 lambs as a sign that the well is his, showing the oath is complete. What gives Abraham? Why is this well so important to you? It's important not merely because it was hard to build. It's important not merely because he's feeling a little possessive over what is rightfully his. This well is so important because it has major theological implications. The presence of this well in this land was a taste of God's commitment to give Abraham's offspring the land, the whole land where that well was built. The fact that Abraham had a well in that land meant he owned that part of the land. The rights to water in a land was a key step towards ownership of all the land. And therefore, this well is a small taste of the reality that Abraham's offspring would possess the whole land. It is a glimpse that God keeps his promises. Stories like this in the Bible are not just some random events that try to help you with some moral lesson for your life. There's just so much more going on here than just a conflict about a well. This story is meant to teach us something about God and about all the reasons why we should trust him. I want you to notice how it closes. Where's it been taking us? What do we need to know about God to give us rock-solid confidence that he'll bring us home? Look at the second part of verse 32. Second part of verse 32. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, rose up and returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. No doubt Abraham is expressing his faith in God through worship here, because that phrase, called upon the name of the Lord, has been used several times in Genesis already. And every time it's talking about this moment of worship to God. But this tree, what's up with this tamarisk tree? That's new. What was it? Why did he plant it? This was a large tree, measuring up to, when fully matured, up to 30 feet. It had coarse leaves, providing lots of shade. And in the ancient Near East, this tree symbolized like prosperity, favor, if you will. It was a very slow-growing tree, which meant it would take a long time before it would be fully matured. What's he doing? Abraham's doing something here. Why plant this tree in this place at this time? For Abraham, this tree represents his claim on the land. He's saying, I think what he's saying, something like, when this tree is fully matured, it's still going to be here when my people, my offspring, are here. It's an act of faith, believing in God's promise that this will be his. God will keep his promise to give him the land. It's going to take a while. The slow-growing tree, it might take longer than we prefer. Like, there's going to be several more generations even before the people of Israel first go to Egypt, and then they're going to be there for 400 years, and then another 40 years through the wilderness. But they will get home. They will get home. Christian, believer in Jesus Christ, you will get home. It feels like it takes longer than what you want. You will get home. You see what gives Abraham confidence in that? It says he called upon the name of the Lord, the everlasting, or it could be translated, the eternal God. The writer of Moses seems to be commenting on what is the emphasis in Abraham's heart as he calls upon the Lord, as he worships him. He calls upon the Lord as the eternal God. Why? Why is that his focus here? Why not call upon the Lord as the one who's all loving, the one who's all powerful, the one who's so gracious, or the God who is holy? Why emphasize the eternality of God in this moment? Think about the nature of the land promise. I want you to hear the words. Let's actually go there. I want you to go here. Go back to Genesis 17. Go to Genesis 17. Music to my ears to hear those pages turning, because I cannot hear you scroll on your phone, so it helps me know you're engaging. So feel free to always just bring a hard copy of the Bible just to humor me so I can hear that you're turning along with me. Genesis 17, look at verse 7. This is the nature of the promise that God made. Genesis 17, verse 7, he says, "And I will establish my covenant between you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you." You know what that means? It's going to be forever that I'm your God. My promise to you is that not just I am God forever, but that I will be your God forever. No, there's no better promise than that. To have God, the creator of all the world, the creator of you, the one who exists, the only God who exists, who rules over everything, for him to say to you, I will be God to you forever. You can't get a better promise than that.